Sergio Perez's future is hanging in the balance, and any day now, news is expected about what his future will hold and what the driver situation at Red Bull will look like. So I think it's appropriate to talk a little bit about some of those drivers that are potential candidates for that Red Bull seat in 2025. So let's get into things. Hello everybody, my name is Michael and welcome back to Last to First. The 2024 season is done and dusted, but believe me, there is still plenty of things to talk about in the off-season of Formula One during the winter time here as we ramp up in preparations for what could be a really exciting 2025 season. One of the big potential breaking news stories coming out soon is the Red Bull driver situation and who is likely to replace Perez. It does look like Perez is going to be replaced. It's just a matter of how and who it's going to be. There's one driver who it's looking like it is going to be him, but there could be some other potential options out there. So let's get into that. If you are interested and want to see more, give the video a like and subscribe. It means a ton. And if you are interested, comment down below what you think of the Red Bull situation and who should really be in that Red Bull seat alongside Max Verstappen. So the first driver I want to talk about is Liam Lawson. And is Liam Lawson worthy of the Red Bull seat? Liam Lawson does look poised to take over that Red Bull seat in place of Perez for 2025. But is he really the right choice? Lawson certainly hasn't been a Red Bull golden boy by any means like a Verstappen or a Vettel, but he's looked like he has been the one to replace Perez if he were to be replaced, since the Ricciardo experiment didn't exactly work out well. Red Bull did snuff him for quite some time over Ricciardo actually, and it was looking like Lawson might not even get any more of a shot in F1 despite having a really good outing last year in place of Ricciardo when he did hurt his hand. But overall, Lawson has shown great potential with decent qualifying pace. He hasn't been too far off Tsunoda. He has been beaten in every qualifying session by Tsunoda, but he's been pretty close, and there have been some asterisks next to that. In general, his race pace has been pretty solid, especially given his experience, and I think Red Bull has been impressed with that race pace given such little experience. And more importantly, Red Bull really seem to think he has more mental robustness than somebody like Tsunoda and probably Perez as well, which that mental robustness is certainly very required in the Red Bull team, not only just alongside Verstappen, but just in that environment in general. It's a very cutthroat environment, and you need to be a very strong driver to survive in that team. I think there's every chance that Lawson will perform better than Perez, especially given his recent struggles, but the ultimate ceiling with Lawson is still pretty unknown, and he hasn't completely wowed in his second mini-season of Formula One. I think he did have a really strong showing last year in 2023 in place of Ricciardo, but his second little mini-stint at the end of this year has been a little less impressive, I guess. He's still done well, but it hasn't been the most wowing factor. He's generally been beaten by Tsunoda, like I mentioned, but it's not been completely whole-handedly, and he's been close to Tsunoda despite Tsunoda's multiple years of experience in Formula One at this point. So given that lack of experience, I think we can give him a slight break for not completely destroying and wiping the floor with Tsunoda right off the gate. I think where things really started to come together for Lawson in terms of his chances of getting the Red Bull seat were really shown in Mexico, where Red Bull really showed a preference of Lawson over Perez when the two got into their quite heated skirmish during that race, which was pretty entertaining. Regardless of what you think of the incident, typically Red Bull would back their driver in the main team, but they were not too concerned about it. They didn't seem too fussed about it despite Lawson basically taking Perez out of the race. And I think that is a big tell of how they have been a bit tired of Perez's performance and how they do seem to be favoring Lawson a bit over Perez for 2025. So given that Lawson has had a pretty short time in Formula One with not so much experience, and he has shown the potential that he has, I think it's definitely worth a shot to throw him into the Red Bull seat for 2025. I think it will be interesting to see how it plays out, and I think no matter what, they do do have to do something about Perez because the Perez situation is just an absolute disaster. So I think Lawson would be an absolutely good shot to throw him in there. Now, the second driver I want to talk about is Yuki Tsunoda and whether or not he deserves a shot in the Red Bull seat. And I think he does at least deserve a shot because he is certainly quick. There's no doubt about that. And he has beat Ricciardo and Lawson and De Vries in their time together. For pretty much all performance metrics, Yuki should at least get an opportunity to show what he can do in the main team at Red Bull. Under normal circumstances, that would certainly warrant a promotion, his performances, but there are some unique challenges for Yuki that do seem to be blocking his path to the main team at Red Bull. One of those challenges for Yuki, and I think the biggest challenge for him that is blocking his path there, is that Red Bull really don't have faith in Yuki. And I don't blame them, to be honest. He has shown that he does not have control over his emotions. He makes a few too many silly mistakes, even being as experienced in F1 as he is now. And just generally, he doesn't seem to be in the good graces of the Red Bull bosses. He has never seemed to be really with Red Bull, really part of their team the entire time. And I think that makes it difficult for Yuki Tsunoda. I spoke on that mental robustness that is required at Red Bull, and I think Red Bull just don't have faith in Yuki having that. Everybody knows his emotional outrages over the radio, and I think that would only be exacerbated in the Red Bull team with the pressure that would be going on his shoulders, and I think it would cause a lot of problems for him and for the team. I think Yuki would 100% crack under the pressure within just a few races at Red Bull. I don't think he would be able to handle that pressure, and I would really imagine him crashing quite frequently, even more than he does now, and probably crashing into Verstappen, which would really be a big no-no. If he were to get promoted, I'd make a prediction right now that he would be dropped no later than the summer break. I just don't think that it would go well for him, even though I think he does deserve a bit of a shot. I think it just wouldn't go so well for him. Another challenge for Yuki Tsunoda, and something that is out of Yuki's control, is the Honda situation. Honda and Red Bull are parting ways in 2026, and Honda has generally been a backer of Yuki, which is probably why he has lasted as long as he has. And I kind of alluded to it before, but it kind of feels like Yuki isn't a proper Red Bull junior driver. He's more of like a Honda driver. He hasn't felt maybe like part of that family at Red Bull, and he's kind of been on the outskirts of things, and I think that's probably been a big factor into why he hasn't gotten promoted. He's kind of on the outskirts, and if he's not part of the family and then he shows some of these other challenging aspects that might not work at Red Bull, I don't really blame them for not wanting to promote him. So with all that, with Honda and Red Bull partying and Red Bull already not having the utmost faith in Yuki, I think it is a bit of a challenging path to Red Bull for Yuki, and I don't see it happening at this point. All signs are pointing to Lawson, but crazier things have happened in Red Bull and Formula One, so we shall see. The third driver I want to talk about is Franco Colapinto, and why he doesn't particularly seem like an option anymore. It was a surprise that he was an option at all, but now it seems like he is not really an option for either team at Red Bull. Franco's really meteoric rise brought him unexpectedly into Red Bull contention, and really thinking back, maybe it's not too surprising that he was in talks with Red Bull, given that they brought in De Vries on a whim after one good performance. So I guess that's typically how Helmut Marko does things. He sees one thing and then attaches himself to it. So I guess it's not too big of a surprise, but still, Franco was very worthy of being linked with Red Bull because he was having some really brilliant performances. I mean, he made an immediate impact by scoring points and showing raw speed right out the gates, and he and Behrman have really shown a changing of the guard going into next year in Formula One, and I think Red Bull were keen to take advantage of that, and we've seen teams like Alpine as well wanting to take advantage of that with getting Jack Doohan in the car, even though they were trying to go after Carlos Sainz, so he was more of a second choice, but nonetheless, they still want to be part of that youth renaissance. While the first part of Franco's stint in Formula One this year was really amazing, he did pretty much take himself out of contention the last few races of the season, which is unfortunate for him. He just started having a bit too many mistakes, particularly at the Brazilian Grand Prix where he crashed, I believe, at least twice, and it showed that he's really not quite the full package yet. I think that probably spooked Red Bull because they were concerned that he would be too raw and would cost Red Bull too much in finances and crashes, and it would cost a lot to get him out of the Williams contract as well. So while I think he would have tremendous speed, I think there would be some rawness to him that would be a bit challenging in the Red Bull fold. Had he not had such poor weekends when those rumors were boiling up, I think there's a chance that his future could look a lot different. Regardless, I think those are mostly just rookie mistakes, and I think he still belongs on the grid, and hopefully Franco will be there come 2026 or sooner. Who knows what will happen next year. The last driver I want to talk about is Carlos Sainz and why they did not choose Carlos Sainz. I think Sainz is really just a victim of being just slightly too good for Red Bull to really want him, which is a crazy thing to say, but Red Bull thought that Sainz would be a bit too close to Verstappen on pace for comfort, and that would cause tension and disruption at the team, which we actually did see some of that during their time together at Toro Rosso. So, I don't necessarily blame them for not wanting that tension, but you need to have a good second driver. We've seen with Perez that having a slow second driver has cost the team millions of dollars by losing the Constructors' Championship. So yeah, I don't know. I think a little bit of tension will be okay, but alas, they chose not to go with Sainz. What's weird with Red Bull is that they want this unicorn driver that doesn't exist. They want somebody that's slower than Verstappen. They want somebody that won't challenge Verstappen at all, but they want somebody who's faster than Perez. And Sainz is as close to that as possible. He will deliver points week in and week out for the Constructors' Championship and will help Verstappen with the Drivers' Championship. He is significantly better than Perez. He's a good team player, is good on the technical side of things, helping the team, and generally he would be beat by Verstappen more times than not. Generally, Charles Leclerc has beaten Sainz for 2/3 of the season on average, and I think Verstappen would easily do that, if not more. So generally, Verstappen wouldn't have to worry about Sainz really challenging him for the Drivers' Championship. So really, it's a bit of a no-brainer, I think, for Red Bull. That's as close to a unicorn driver or second driver that you can get, but I guess they thought that he was a bit too close on pace. What's interesting about all this is Red Bull's driver program just in general, how it really used to be the best. I mean, they really started things out. They were the team that had the biggest program. They were recruiting the most drivers. They had 2 teams where they could funnel up to the main team, but now it's just behind, and I think they're behind with their philosophy on F1 drivers as well. Basically, every other team in the front is having 2 number 1 drivers, and Red Bull is still messing about trying to have a number 2 driver. We see McLaren with 2 absolute amazing drivers, Ferrari with 2 beasts in there as well, and yeah, Red Bull is just kind of messing around. Of course, Mercedes as well looks like they'll have 2 number 1 drivers, so why isn't Red Bull partaking in on this? Sainz is not quite a number 1 driver, but he's that like 1.25, 1.5 driver who would be a beautiful second fit to Verstappen. Sainz is also just an unfortunate victim of Red Bull kind of changing their driver philosophy over these past few years. This is really the first time that they were actually committed to keeping and helping the second driver rather than binning them the first chance they got, like Albon and Gasly. They didn't give any opportunity whatsoever for Albon and Gasly, and they just tossed them to the curb. And now with Perez, they've given him at least 1 season too long, but I think they should have dropped him in 2023 as well. I think the pattern has been clear for several seasons now, and really his disaster of performances was just covered up last year by Red Bull having the greatest car of all time. But yeah, they normally just bin people off, and for some reason now all of a sudden when Perez is probably doing worse than Albon and Gasly, they are trying everything in their power to keep him and not get somebody like Sainz. So I think Carlos Sainz would have been the perfect fit for Red Bull, and I think most people probably agree on that. But Red Bull thought differently, and they wanted to go with somebody who's not quite as close to Verstappen. And boy, that would have been an interesting driver pair, because I think Sainz has really evolved over time, and it would have been fun to see. And I think he just deserves another shot in a big team, since he is getting axed from Ferrari. So after talking about all that and discussing those drivers, is Lawson still the right choice? I think because Red Bull decided Sainz was not the right fit for them, they thought he was a bit too good, I think Lawson is definitely the right choice. I think Sainz was clearly the best and the no-brainer option, but Red Bull thought differently. I think Lawson has shown good enough outright qualifying and race pace. He's shown a good mental robustness, good and aggressive racecraft, and has shown that he at least deserves a shot at a full season in RB since he's only had these little stand-in times for part seasons. And yeah, I think he has shown enough to be worthy of at least a shot because Perez needs to go, unfortunately for him. The tough thing with Lawson is that his ceiling is a bit unknown, but he has shown to have a pretty high ceiling, and with experience, I think he will only get a bit better. Lawson is a good choice, but I don't think he's necessarily the perfect choice, just the right choice in the given situation. The problem for Lawson is that he is going to have to perform immediately because I don't think Red Bull is going to mess around and wait to replace him like they have with Perez. I think they're likely to go back to being their old ruthless selves, and if he does not perform right away, then I think he is going to get axed pretty quickly, and then we'll move on to the next driver to see what happens next. While Yuki has generally been the slightly quicker driver of the pair of them, I think a bit more experience on Lawson's side will really change the look of how things play out there. Yuki also just does not have that mental robustness, that mental toughness that Red Bull needs, and I don't really blame them for not having faith in him to not make mistakes and not crack under the pressure. I certainly wouldn't be upset if Red Bull were to put Yuki in. I think he does deserve that shot because he has shown how quick he is. He has shown that speed and does deserve something. But I think Red Bull and I already know the outcome of that experiment, and I don't think it will end particularly well for Yuki Tsunoda. Lastly, Franco was an interesting outside choice, but I think he's still a bit too raw for Red Bull to go right into that team, and I think it would be a challenging time for him. Maybe he could wind up in the RB team if Lawson does get promoted, or maybe if somebody gets dropped next year. Also, if they did choose to go with Franco, I think the Red Bull juniors would really wonder what's the point of being in the program if the juniors of that program, like Yuki and Lawson, weren't even the ones to get promoted. It would not look particularly good for Red Bull. But I think Franco will have his time in F1, just probably not yet in Red Bull. So yes, I think Liam Lawson is the right choice to step into Red Bull in 2025 in place of Perez. They have to do something about Perez because it has been too disastrous, and I think Lawson will do a decent enough job. I was surprised that the official news wasn't announced last week. I thought we would hear something, but I'm sure that we will hear some murmurings this week and get some more official news on what is going to happen with that Red Bull driver situation. So let me know down below in the comments what you all think. Do you think Liam Lawson is the right choice? It is looking like he is going to be the option that Red Bull do choose, but does somebody like Yuki Tsunoda deserve the shot more, and should they promote him to the main team, or should there be an outside shot like Franco Colapinto? Let me know down below in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Red Bull driver situation. If you are interested, give me a follow on social media. I'm on X as Last to First Real, first spelled F1RST. I'm on Instagram as Last to First, also on all the major podcast platforms as Last to First. Also, of course, on YouTube as Last to First. Once again, first spelled F1RST. So thank you all for tuning in. I've got a lot of fun stuff planned for this offseason in Formula One as we gear up for what could be a really exciting 2025 season. So I'll see you all in the next video.